Master Kenobi, Mandalore's violent past is behind us. All of our warriors were exiled to our moon, Concordia. They died out years ago.
Are you certain? I recently encountered a man who wore Mandalorian armor. Jango Fett.
What is the real reason? As stated by Clone Wars director Dave Filoni, Boba Fett has been deemed as not a Mandalorian and as a fraud by George Lucas himself.
Jango Fett was a common bounty hunter. How he acquired that armor is beyond me.
So if he isn't a true Mandalorian, what is the actual connection between Boba Fett and the Mandalorian people? Who is he really, and what are the ways that he falls short of the Mandalorian standard? In fact, why would the Fetts even wear the Mandalorian armor at all, and what is the deeper significance of the ding mark on Boba Fett's helmet? Today, I'm here to expose the lies of the Fetts, pretenders of Mandalore.
Boba, get on board!
In discussions directly with George, he was very adamant about Jango not being Mandalorian, which is the entire reason why that scene existed, that moment.
To understand whether or not the Fetts are Mandalorians, we must first understand what it means to be a Mandalorian. In the expanded universe, Mandalorian identity was more about culture than bloodline. As such, the Fetts were considered Mandalorians, and Boba Fett himself was Mandalore for a time. However, canon standards of Mandalorians differ greatly. In canon, Mandalorian clan structure was like a pyramid, with the ruler or Mandalore at the top and the protectors enforcing their rule. Below them were the political factions known as the houses, made up of family clans. One example was House Vizsla, which was comprised of Clan Vizsla and Clan Ren. Under the rule of Duchess Satine Kryze and the new Mandalorian government during the Clone Wars, the Mandalorians had mostly rejected their martial ancestral ways, a far departure from the warring Mandalorians of the expanded universe. Now, while Boba Fett is responsible for the popularity among fans of Mandalorian armor, Boba himself was never confirmed to be a Mandalorian, or to have ever been exposed to the Mandalorian culture, in canon at least, despite the mythosaur skull on his pauldron. Son of the legendary bounty hunter Jango Fett, he was raised with the intent of being trained from birth to be the greatest bounty hunter alive, a profession that Mandalorians have taken up, with Jango working hard to pass on all that he knew. After losing his father in his childhood, Boba followed in Jango's footsteps, pursuing a life of bounty hunting. Using Jango's contacts, Boba began his profession at an extremely young age, gaining experience and renown across the galaxy. Boba wore the armor of his deceased father, battered and scarred from Boba's years of hunting. Boba Fett's identity was only ever in bounty hunting, and he was never taught or practiced in the Mandalorian ways, nor was he inducted into their culture or a Mandalorian clan, more importantly. Boba Fett was quite literally raised as a bounty hunter, and although a favoured profession of some Mandalorians, he is not, by definition, a Mandalorian by blood.
And who was the original host?
A bounty hunter called Jango Fett. Apart from his pay, which is considerable, Fett demanded only one thing: an unaltered clone for himself. Curious, isn't it?
In order to understand who Boba Fett is, we must first understand his father more so. I say father loosely, as we know from Attack of the Clones that Boba is, in actuality, an unaltered clone of Jango himself, taken on and raised as the son of the bounty hunter. Since their genetic code is literally identical, we can safely conclude that if we understand the heritage of Jango, we also understand the heritage of Boba. Now, according to the Complete Visual Dictionary, during the years leading up to the Clone Wars, Jango Fett was esteemed as the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy. With tact and finesse, Fett had gained enough of a reputation to be selected as the ideal template for a clone army. His fame and intimation was only enhanced by wearing the armor of the greatest warrior culture in the galaxy. Because the Fetts wear, and I dare say made, the Mandalorian armor iconic in the Star Wars universe, it has been assumed for many years by audiences that the Fetts, or at least Jango, were Mandalorians themselves, since that would be the most natural way they would acquire said armor. Jango Fett himself claims to come from the planet Concord Dawn, one of the primary planets in the Mandalorian sector. Concord Dawn was one of the first planets conquered by the early Mandalorian people. The planet suffered heavy collateral damage in the Crusades, with half of the planet being shattered and broken, the scars remaining to this day. Jango's armor and claimed birthplace led many, both within and out of the Star Wars universe, to believe that Jango Fett was indeed a Mandalorian who left to pursue a life of bounty hunting. However, this was simply not true. George Lucas himself stated, somewhat controversially, in a conversation with Dave Filoni, that Boba, and by extension Jango, are not Mandalorian.
The assumption being when Attack of the Clones came out, of course Jango must be a Mandalorian because there he has the armor. But, he's a bounty hunter. Bounty hunters, we showed in the series, wear all kinds of armor. Of course, Boba Fett famously wearing Mandalorian armor. So you have that tradition of his father's son wearing this armor, but it doesn't speak to the bigger warrior caste.
For generations, my ancestors fought proudly as warriors against the Jedi. Now, that woman tarnishes the very name Mandalorian.
In the era surrounding the Clone Wars, the Mandalorians' warrior traditions were challenged as the new Mandalorians seized power and attempted to reform Mandalore into a pacifist world. Because of this, the Mandalorians who respected their warrior heritage were banished to the Mandalore's moon, Concordia. The warrior Mandalorians called themselves Death Watch and existed to preserve the honor of the Mandalorian way of life, a life defined by a warrior's honor and conquest. When Obi-Wan goes to the planet Mandalore to investigate rumors of Mandalorian warriors siding with the Separatists, he references his encounter with Fett. Minister Olmec totally disavows Fett's claim to Mandalorian heritage and heavily implies that it would have been impossible for Jango to come by his armor honorably. This is reinforced by the Death Watch entry in Star Wars Encyclopedia, which repeats that Jango Fett had no known association with Mandalore or Death Watch, leaving Jango Fett's true past a mystery. So if Jango isn't a Mandalorian, then where did he get his armor? While it's possible that he killed a Mandalorian and claimed the armor as a trophy, there is one tiny detail that seems to suggest that his armor is fake. Mandalorian armor is made from Beskar, an iron forged from the metals native to Mandalore and Concordia. As discussed in previous videos, the metal is highly durable, nearly impervious to blaster fire, and able to repel anything short of a direct and forceful stab from a lightsaber. Before the Great Purge under the Galactic Empire, Beskar was the only material used by Mandalorians in their armor. Aside from its obvious tactical superiority, the metal had a cultural and almost religious significance among the Mandalorian people. Just as Beskar was stronger than any other metal, so too were the Mandalorians stronger than all other cultures. And this forces us to ask questions about the aforementioned dent in Boba Fett's helmet. As we see in the Mandalorian series on Disney+, Beskar is able to take direct hits from blaster fire without getting so much as a mark. But what of Boba's armor? Well, according to the Visual Dictionary, Jango Fett's armor was not made of Beskar, but instead from a much more standard metal known as Durasteel. While Durasteel is still strong enough to put up some resistance to blaster fire, it is significantly less resilient than Beskar, and more importantly, significantly less Mandalorian. This explains the dent we see in Boba Fett's helmet, as his Durasteel armor was strong enough to keep him alive, but not strong enough to be Mandalorian. According to a deleted or unfinished episode of The Clone Wars, the dent was courtesy of a shootout between Boba Fett and the bounty hunter Cad Bane, with Bane's blaster being responsible for the helmet's ding. And this makes sense, since we know that Durasteel would be damaged where Beskar would stay strong. While surviving a shot to the head is still impressive, and we still love Boba, we know that the armor is confirmed to be made of Durasteel and not Beskar. And since we also know the pre-Empire Mandalorians made their armor out of Beskar, we know that he couldn't have possibly made Fett's Durasteel replica. This means that Jango Fett acquired or fashioned armor in the Mandalorian style, which is a fitting microcosm of Fett. Just like Fett himself, the armor looked Mandalorian, but unfortunately, in canon at least, it was only an imposter.
I'm just a simple man trying to make my way in the universe.
And this begs the question, if the armor wasn't made by Mandalorians, then why was it made to look Mandalorian? Are the Fetts annexed into the culture? An homage of ways to the EU Mandalorian warriors of old? And how are the Fetts still the most famed bounty hunters if they aren't actually Mandalorian? Does bloodline matter at all, or is it all about being the best warrior that you can be? Is a Mandalorian still an ideal versus a bloodline? As we've seen before during the Clone Wars, a bloodline and peacekeeping Mandalorians are, well, they're not so strong.